No, it is a religion. There is not one bit of proof for it. Do you know what science says in the dictionary? Things we can test, observe and demonstrate. But you can't do that with evolution. It's just a fairy tale for grown-ups.
One, you don't know what science is. Science also includes the creations of theoretical models to explain the real world and deductive reasoning. For instance, like in the fields of forensics and other such things. Two, evolution has been fully shown. Even if the fossil record didn't exist.
What?
The fossil record didn't exist.
What?
You kids are going to be taught that each of the layers of the earth is a different age. They've got Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archaeozoic. Did you know the whole geologic column is baloney? It doesn't exist. We covered that on video 4. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting these rock layers. Petrified tree connecting a bunch of layers can't be millions of years difference in the age of those layers. One in Cookeville, Tennessee, not far from here. The bottom is coalified, the center is petrified, the top is coalified again. Runs through 2 coal seams.
Genetically, we have shown embryology, all kinds of other methods. We have shown evolution to exist.
What?
God said that animals will produce after their kind. Cats have cats. Dogs have dogs. Cows don't have humans. That they will give birth to their own kind. And there hasn't been a transitional form found anywhere that links one animal to another. So why do you still believe that? And it's just common sense. Common sense.
Common sense is what you don't have, because you're lying to us on a medium where I can just go type into Google and realize that you're lying about the transitional fossils.
What? What?
It says the transitional forms are extremely rare. That is, if evolution is true, you ought to be able to find fossils of 90% reptile, 10% bird. 80% reptile, 20% bird. 70% reptile, 30% bird. 50% reptile, 50% bird, and so on. But he says this is extremely rare. In fact, the evolutionists can only point to a handful of very controversial fossils. So let's draw that diagram from Scientific American the way Stephen Gould says the evidence really is. You'll notice that I erased all the dotted blue lines. That's because Dr. Gould said we don't really have fossil evidence for those dotted blue lines. And then I did one other thing. I changed the bottom ends of those blue bars. I took away the little bend. Why? Because the blue bars don't exist in the fossil record. They only exist on this page of the magazine. It's the fossil creatures that are in the rock record. And as far as they go down, when they find a kangaroo, it looks like a kangaroo. It doesn't look like a part kangaroo. As far as they go down, they see a camel. It's a camel, not a part camel. Now that to me does not look like the evolution tree of life. It looks a lot like the creation forest of life. And Gould goes on in the article that I quoted to say that the 2 characteristics of the fossil record are abrupt appearance and stasis. That is, that the first time we see a creature appearing in the lowest rock formation that we find it, it appears fully formed, fully functional, fully recognizable. It just abruptly appears. And then as we come up through the rock records, as long as we see that creature, it basically stays the same. Oh, a little bit of variety, but it's basically the same creature.
Like we have an old population and there's a split for some reason, and genetic changes happens, and then there's a new species that's no longer able to breed with the old species. We have physically observed that. Okay?
What?
Then we're going to have what's called macroevolution. That's where an animal changes to a different kind of animal. Did you know nobody has ever seen a dog produce a non-dog? Never. You may get a big dog or a little dog, but you're going to get a dog every time. And it could be that the dog, the wolf, and the coyote had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. They probably did. But every 5-year-old kid knows they're the same kind of animal.
Well, what about mutations? Do they supply the new information for evolution? These poor critters have been the object of many evolutionary experiments for many decades. Fruit flies. They take these fruit flies, start with 2 normal ones up here at the top, and they bombard them with radiation to see what kinds of mutations they can produce. And they produce fruit flies with fringed wings, and fruit flies with little itty-bitty vestigial wings, and fruit flies with no wings at all, or fruit flies with an extra set of wings but no muscles to run those wings, so those extra wings get in the way of the ones that do work. Or fruit flies with legs, an extra set of legs growing out of their eyeballs. All kinds of variety from these mutations. But none of these fruit flies are an improvement on the fruit fly. And none of them would survive in the wild. Nature would select the healthy, normal ones and weed out these mutants. The only reason they survive is because they're in the laboratory where the scientists protect them for their experiments. So, we need to realize that mutations are a fact. All creationists believe in mutations, even though sometimes evolutionists imply that we don't. But mutations nearly always reduce the genetic information. They never increase functional information.
We have physically observed new species evolving.
What?
All point mutations that have been studied on the molecular level turn out to reduce the genetic information and not to increase it. He even gives an example. He says, with this picture, no mutations have ever been observed that have converted an animal to a markedly different species, say from a fly to a wasp. I mean, that's not a very big change to go from a fly to a wasp. But he says we haven't even observed a mutation to make that kind of a change. You see, an amoeba has certain information in its DNA for making an amoeba, but it has no information for making legs or hair or a nose or a stomach or eyeballs. A horse has genetic information for making all of those parts, but an amoeba does not. So you cannot make a horse by taking the DNA information in an amoeba and just copying it over and over and making mistakes in the copying process as you go. You have to have new information added to the DNA molecule. I live in Cincinnati, and suppose I wanted to go on a train to Chicago. And so I take my trusty train schedule with me, and I go down to the Cincinnati train station. And I don't pay attention to any of the signs. I've got my trusty train schedule with me. And my train schedule says that the train to Chicago is on platform 14. So I walk to platform 14, get on the train. Unfortunately, there was a mutation in my train schedule. The train on platform 14 is not going to Chicago. It's going to Atlanta. The train that's going to Chicago is on platform 24. I'm on the wrong platform. It does not matter how slowly that train on platform 14 goes. It can move a centimeter a century, and it will never get me to Chicago, because it is going in the wrong direction. It's going downhill, and I need to be going uphill. Well, the train of natural selection and mutation is the train that the evolutionists say will take us from a single-celled creature all the way to all the diverse and complex plants and animals we see in the world, which would involve increased information. The problem is that the train of natural selection and mutation is going in the wrong direction. It's not going in the direction of increased information. It's going in the direction of decreased information.
We have witnessed new species happening. They're giving birth of something that can no longer breed with the original population.
What?
We need to be very, very clear about the difference between evolution and creation, because the evolutionists are notorious at confusing things. They will often say that evolution is change. Well, evolution is change, but it is a certain kind of change. I'm changing. I don't look exactly the same as I did when I graduated from high school. I have a few less hairs, a few more pounds in different places. But I can guarantee you one thing. I am not evolving. If anything, I'm devolving. I'm going downhill. I'm not going uphill to superhuman. So it's a certain kind of change that evolution has in mind. And I like to call it vertical change. See, the evolutionists believe that the first living cell came into existence by chance, and then it diversified over time by mutations and natural selection into the first fish. And then some of those fish gradually, over millions of years, evolved into the first amphibians. And then those amphibians evolved into reptiles, and some of the reptiles evolved into birds, some of the reptiles evolved into mammals, and some of the mammals evolved into people. So it's vertical variation from one kind to a completely different kind of creature. The creation model is very different. The creationists say that there is horizontal variation. God created the first single-celled creatures, different kinds of single-celled creatures. He built into their genetic information the potential for variety within their kind, but not the ability to change into some other kind of creature. He created the first kind of fish, distinct, with the genetic potential for producing variety within that kind of fish, but not to change into a different kind of fish or to change into a non-fish. The same with amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, and people. God supernaturally created the first representative kinds with variety, potential for variety.
We have shown evolution to exist.
What?